Let's move on to the next chapter, which is titled Visitors. Despite it is small, Thoreau's house often has friends coming over. Here comes a famous passage where Thoreau says, "I had 3 chairs in my house, 1 for solitude, 2 for friendship, 3 for society." In reality, there's only 1 chair, you know. The first 2 chairs Thoreau mentioned, 1 for solitude, 1 for friendship, don't really exist. When visitors came in larger and unexpected numbers, there was only a 3rd chair for them all, but they generally economized the room by standing up. According to the commentator, even when Thoreau wasn't living at Walden Pond, his room still had only 1 chair. In my house, I've had 25 or 30 souls, with their bodies, at once under my roof. My best room, however, is the pine grove behind my house. My best room, however, my withdrawing room, always ready for company, on whose carpet the sun rarely fell, was the pine wood behind my house. The carpet here means the grass. Thither in summer days, when distinguished guests came, I took them, and a priceless domestic swept the floor, dusted the furniture, and kept the things in order. The priceless domestic here refers to Mother Nature herself, who takes care of tidying up everything. Thoreau had some really interesting guests, and some of them even joined him in his work, inspiring him to describe these fascinating individuals. Among them was a Canadian man, of whom Thoreau says, "Such an exuberance of animal spirits had he that he sometimes tumbled down and rolled on the ground with laughter at anything that made him think and tickled him. Looking round upon the trees, he would exclaim, 'By George, I can enjoy myself well enough here chopping. I want no better sport.' Sometimes, when at leisure, he amused himself all day in the woods with a pocket pistol, firing salutes to himself at regular intervals as he walked. In the winter, he had a fire by which at noon he warmed his coffee in a kettle. As he sat on a log to eat his dinner, the chickadees would sometimes come round and alight on his arm, and peck at the potato in his fingers, and he said that he liked to have the little fellers about him." That was Thoreau's friend. Thoreau just loved these woodsmen, farmers who lived naturally. Once he asked this friend, "Aren't you tired from chopping so many trees every day?" The friend answered, "Gorapit, I never was tired in my life." He was a particularly energetic person. Many a traveler came out of his way to see me and the inside of my house, and, as an excuse for calling, asked for a glass of water. I told them that I drank at the pond, and pointed thither, offering to lend them a dipper. Here's an interesting note from Thoreau's diary on January 17th, 1852. He mentioned that 2 girls came by and asked for water. He lent them the dipper, but they ran off with it. Thoreau called them the disgrace of their sex and humanity for stealing his only dipper. I had some guests from those not reckoned commonly among the town's poor, but who should be, who are among the world's poor at any rate. Guests who appeal not to your hospitality, but to your hospitality. Who earnestly wish to be helped, and preface their appeal with the information that they are resolved, for one thing, never to help themselves. I require of a visitor that he be not actually starving, though he may have the very best appetite in the world. However, he got it. Objects of charity are not guests. Men who did not know when their visit had terminated, though I went about my business again, answering them from greater and greater remoteness. Men of almost every degree of wit called on me in the migrating season. Some had more wits than they knew what to do with, runaway slaves with plantation manners. Thoreau's cabin by Walden Pond once sheltered quite a few runaway slaves. There's no record of them staying inside, but it was indeed a transit station that helped many enslaved individuals who managed to escape from farms. I could not but notice some of the peculiarities of my visitors. Girls and boys and young women generally seemed glad to be in the woods. They looked in the pond and at the flowers and improved their time. Men of business, even farmers, thought only of solitude and employment, and of the great distance at which I dwelt from something or other. And though they said that they loved a ramble in the woods occasionally, it was obvious that they did not. Doctors, lawyers, uneasy housekeepers, who pried into my cupboard and bed when I was out, how came Mrs. to know that my sheets were not as clean as hers? Young men who had ceased to be young, and had concluded that it was safest to follow the beaten track of the professions, all these generally said that it was not possible to do so much good in my position. Aye, there was the rub. There was the rub. This phrase is from the Hamlet. The old and infirm and the timid of whatever age or sex thought most of sickness and sudden accident and death. To them, life seemed full of danger. What danger is there? If you don't think of any, if a man is alive, there is always a danger that he may die. A man sits as many risks as he runs. I feel like if I were a visitor to Thoreau's lakeside house, I'd probably be the kind of mundane, middle-aged man he describes, thinking first about practicalities. How to manage, how to make money. Is it safe here? What if a vagabond shows up? I worry about these safety issues every day. But as Thoreau says, where can you truly be safe? If a man is alive, there is always a danger that he may die. That makes a lot of sense. Next, there's a chapter where Thoreau specifically describes his bean field, about him planting beans. He says, "I planted about 2 acres and a half of upland, and as it was only about 15 years since the land was cleared, and I myself had got out 2 or 3 cords of stumps, I did not give it any manure. But an extinct nation had anciently dwelt here and planted corn and beans ere white men came to clear the land, and so to some extent had exhausted the soil for corn and beans. As I drew a still fresher soil about the rows with my hoe, I disturbed the ashes of unchronicled nations who in primeval years lived under these heavens, and their small implements of war and hunting were brought to the light of this modern day. When my hoe tinkled against the stones, that music echoed to the woods and the sky and was an accompaniment to my labor which yielded an instant and immeasurable crop. It was no longer beans that I hoed, nor I that hoed beans, and I remembered with as much pity as pride, if I remembered at all, my acquaintances who had gone to the city to attend the oratorios. The nighthawk circled overhead in the sunny afternoons, for I sometimes made a day of it, like a mote in the eye, or in heaven's eye, falling from time to time with a swoop and a sound, as if the heavens were rent, torn at last to very rags and tatters, and yet a seamless cope remained. Small imps that fill the air in eagles glide past from on high. Or sometimes I watched a pair of hen hawks circling high in the sky, alternately soaring and descending, approaching and leaving one another as if they were the embodiment of my own thoughts. Thoreau believes that the sound of his hoe striking is far more wonderful than going far to the city to listen to an opera. So, he feels that he's not really working this afternoon, but watching opera, enjoying this scene brought by nature. I am wont to forget that the sun looks on our cultivated fields, on the prairies, and on forests without distinction. They all reflect and absorb his rays alike, and the former make but a small part of the glorious picture which he beholds in his daily course. What though I value the seed of these beans, and harvest that in the fall of the year? This broad field which I have looked at so long, looks not to me as the principal cultivator, but away from me to influences more genial to it, which water and make it green. These beans have results that are not harvested by me. Do they not grow for woodchucks partly? Notice how we're gradually ascending to philosophical heights here. It's because at the end of this piece, what Thoreau expresses echoes the viewpoint of Zhuangzi in the Adjustment of Controversies. He says, "How then can our harvest fail? Shall I not rejoice also at the abundance of the weeds whose seeds are the granary of the birds? It matters little comparatively whether the fields fill the farmer's barns. The true husbandman will cease from anxiety, as the squirrels manifest no concern whether the woods will bear chestnuts this year or not, and finish his labor with every day, relinquishing all claim to the produce of his fields, and sacrificing in his mind not only his first, but his last fruits also."